Welcome back, everybody. With us, we have the captain of Does This Game Do Emotional Damage or Have Emotional Damage, Naya. Congratulations on the victory. How are you feeling after that?
Very much relieved because it's like we were after game one being an hour, we're just like, oh my gosh, we're hoping game two goes better because they did surprise us, but we were just really glad that they gave us a good series and we had fun while all doing it. So it was it was a lot of fun.
All right, talking about game number one, a bit of a barn burner, uh, as one might expect. However, you guys had a very strong team fight, and once everything pulled together, it looked very, very nice indeed, especially on the as we were approaching the end of that game. Do want to ask you though, how do you guys keep your mental fortitude throughout that game as it gets really, really intense, especially through the mid stages of that game?
Honestly, it just was having a trust for each other, like constantly reminding each other, it's like, hey, we do have the late game, okay? We don't need to necessarily pressure them or be hard on them, because of our team fight, they don't really want to go up to our high ground, and they don't have a really strong way of taking our high ground either. So honestly, it was just that trust for each other and the black holes that did come out. So really, I really just so glad that my guys were able to keep it together themselves too as well, especially with some bad fights that they were able to salvage from Mochi.
Yep.
I'm really glad we have you actually on because you were on the Enigma game one and kind of talking about the earlier stages. You went for a much different build than I've seen on support Enigma, opting
Hmm.
and you obviously have a lot of levels on there here. You're level like 20 something, like very good at Enigma clearly. So usually we see the Eidolons coming out, but you're opting more for the Midnight Pulse and the Malefice. Can you give us
Yes.
some insight on that one because I haven't seen that one before.
Uh-huh. The big thing about so beforehand, before the changes to Eidolons, where they increased the cooldown and mana cost, that was the way to go because you could deny every range creep. So it was basically the old Lich before, where you were just sapping that XP. But since that changes to balance it out, it hurt. So instead, especially versus a tree lane, the Midnight Pulse ruins tree's laning stage because now he has no trees to work with in a massive area too as well.
Right. No,
And
that
then the
makes sense.
damage control from Malefice too as well. It's like if you're going for an aggressive lane, it's beautiful for it. And that's just my opinion on it.
All right, moving on to game number two. So obviously first pick Tiny countered with that timber saw, and then we saw your answers in that silencer uh, for for you guys. I kind of want to go through this draft a little bit because to me it seemed like you guys drafted two winning lanes, and then when we got in the game, it looked like the lanes kind of went even all three places. Were you guys how are you guys able to keep through all that? Because like obviously like I see Necro and the Silencer, I'm like, oh, Silencer should just win that lane a bunch, and then all of a sudden Mirana comes mid and the Necros actually has a game, or up against the Ricky Io lane, it looked like the Pango was like 1,000 gold behind at that 10-minute mark. So
Mm.
how do you guys like be like, okay, we didn't win the lanes we thought we were going to win, how do we move forward from this?
Yeah. On that part though, it was just honestly we really didn't have too much of a plan because we knew for that game is like they didn't have a way to take towers. So we were okay with taking some losses on it. And especially too as well, since the Marana was having to rotate around, that did free up our Tiny too as well to be able to get caught up, and that was something we were totally okay with. Because like even though it was a Marana Timbersaw lane, that lane should have been definitely we felt should have been harder for us. But I feel like since Marana was rotating to help out the other lanes, it helped our Tiny out, which is what we were looking for, rather than hoping the Silencer and Pingolier would take over the game.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and take over the game that Tiny Hero did. That game, after a few team fights kind of didn't go or went the way of you guys, as opposed to Mochi, that game quickly turned into a schlacking, as we like to say on this stream. But
Slacking.
slacking, yeah, yeah, it was very far ahead. But how do y'all kind of keep your mental and say like, all right, we just have to not throw? Like, how do y'all stop from throwing basically, and when you're so far ahead like that?
That's an excellent question, and I think it was just more a part of understanding what parts of the map we wanted to control and how it was that we wanted to play, because we were waiting to pick up some items on some of our heroes, and since for their draft they didn't necessarily want to look for fights, we could definitely take up a better defensive positioning, since they would have to expose their heroes to our team fight with the Grimstroke and Pingolier. Now, and that would give us the advantage later on if they never decided to look for us. And that's where we felt the fight happen. There at our ancients, when they were coming up the stairs, I mean, they lined up beautifully for the Pingolier roll and the Grimstroke, and that's honestly all we needed to start coming back.
All right, final question of the interview. If you had interviewed with Zen or before, we both asked the same question at the end. So for both games, give me the MVP from your team and why. Starting with game number 1. It can be anyone on your team, including yourself.
Okay. I was about to say, it's like, if I was thinking about what the boys were going to say, they'd be shouting right now, me. Because definitely it's like, we all, for game 1.
Yeah, that's
the
fair.
4 or 5 man black holes, whatnot, and we even checked some of the streams too as well for the clips of those black holes, and we're just like, oh my gosh, this Finnick, you're just so full of energy even after an hour long game.
They were beautiful.
They were great
beautiful
black holes. Moving on to second game, who's your MVP from your team?
Respectively, if I was to, it would have to be Winter.
Great
It's
tiny
definitely
game.
for sure it's a great tiny game. Even though it was, he kept asking me to please ban the Necro, and the whole time through the rest of the draft, he's like, "Just pick me something else. I don't want to play tiny into Necro." And I was like, "It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. Give me the Dazzle, and I can keep us alive through the rest of the game." And he's like, "We can actually do this."
Actually, that was one thing. Did you know that silencer was going mid, or were you initially planning on taking that into the Timbersaw lane, and then you're like,
"Oh yeah." The moment we saw the Timbersaw Necro, the Father Mar was like, "Give me it, give me the silencer." Because who do they lane against it now? It's like Timbersaw or Necro. So it's Necro would definitely have the better chance because he doesn't have to get in so close and can regen himself up.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for the interview. And that's all the time we have for today's broadcast.